Sweet. Welcome to the Tuesday Triggers podcast. Today we have the Frank Saunders, right? So if you've been living under a rock in the lead gen GTM space, you don't know who Frank is. But for most of you that do, you know Frank has a bunch of different products. I mean, man, the evolution of what you guys have in terms of products over the last 2 years has been wild, from Agent Frank to Salesforce to MailForge to everything.
Yeah.
As per usual, man. I think we've got our SaaS product, RevReply, and the thing I love about this community is we're all working towards a better tomorrow for us, for people that are doing that, live in cold email on a day-to-day basis, or salespeople, account executives, lead gen agencies, normal people that are starting their companies and trying to bootstrap it, and all of these different things. We're just trying to make tools that help people drive more success ultimately. And so by all accounts, we're friends. We're good homies that are like, hell yeah, you just showed me a little bit of your new agentic stuff and it is amazing. And so for today's session, I'll let you do an intro for yourself. I think we're going to be veering all over the place. I think some of the advice we want to talk about is people starting their first agency, getting to your first million in revenue or 5 million in revenue or whatever. I think we want to talk a little bit about the agentic future, as everyone calls it, and kind of veer from there. But outside of that, man, super glad to have you on. Love for you to give your own introduction, and then we can kick it off.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah. So a bit about me. I'm a typical sales guy, but I didn't come from the, let's call it, the lead gen agency space. I've been in software space for over a decade. So I've been selling software. So for other interesting CEOs, whether that's on the machine learning front, so the old school AI. So I'm very familiar with the AI myself because I used to sell AI for a few years, but it wasn't the Gen AI stuff. It used to be, the machine learning stuff. And then my previous job, actually, I had a sales team of about 50 folks, and it was kind of back in the days, growth at all costs. And that's when I realized, damn, there's a better way to build pipe with significantly fewer humans, but you need to orchestrate the stack in a particular way. And for me, it's really the stack. It's not one software. And I know there's a lot of kind of software out there, but I look at it from a sort of Apple ecosystem kind of approach, where really to build pipe effectively, you need multiple softwares to achieve that. And they have to talk to each other in a particular way, etc. So hence, we've been building quite aggressively. So we've been around in the space for, next month's going to be a couple of years, based in Europe, but we have folks all scattered around the world. Most of our customers are in the US. It goes into thousands. In the first year, we scaled from $0 to $3 million, and then also in the first year, we sort of scaled from 3 co-founders to about 40 or so folks now all around the world. And we do what we call parallel building. We're stacking software on top of each other, and the latest software that we rolled out was what's called PrimeForge, so essentially provisioning Google and Microsoft accounts. And then that's on top of the other two infrastructure products that we have. One is SMTP on the shared IPs, which is the MailForge one, and the other one is like dedicated IPs. And then the last one, I think, maybe it's going to be the last one for this year, I'm not sure, it depends on a few things, but is LeadsForge.ai. So it's something that's coming out next week, and that's essentially a search engine, or it's like ChatGPT to find leads. Across multitude of databases. So there's about 500 plus contacts that we can search for right now, and we keep on hooking up more and more kind of databases into the search engine. And it's kind of slightly different concept to the data, sort of the table approach, right? So where you can have gazillions of features. It's more of a kind of search approach, really. So that's what we'll be up to, and have thousands of agencies right now that we power, but also a lot of direct customers across enterprise or SMB, whatever. Have our own little agent called Agent Frank. We typically name agents after people that have been really good in sales. So I decided I'm going to be the first one, but we have other agents also cooking in the future that we're looking to implement, because we believe, essentially, just like you have an SDR team, we believe in the AI SDR team, essentially. So there will be more agents that we're going to be cooking later down the road.
So run me through the suite of product. And what all do you have? I mean, it's hard for me to keep up, right?
Sure.
Salesforge, MailForge. What all you got? You go through it.
Sure. So the core product is naturally Salesforce, right? So this is where you execute emails, right? So there's a bunch of other cool softwares that you can use to send emails, but think of it like best in class kind of from an email deliverability standpoint to send out emails. And then within the same software, we got an agent Frank. So we're big believers essentially in blending capabilities. So let's say you as an agency or you as a business owner, you onboard your sales team, but in tandem you want to spin up agents. So why, here's an example of that. So let's say the sales team will go after key accounts because it makes sense from a unit economic standpoint, but it doesn't make sense to go after the long tail. So there's typically a lot of tiny fish out there that you could be going after, but naturally the sales team doesn't want to go after those accounts. So this is an example where you would spin up an agent. But the agent, you can also just use the agent on its own or just the human, what we call part of the software. So yeah, that's the core software. That's what we call the mothership. So around the mothership, we build a bunch of different software. So on the infrastructure front, the customer can choose which infrastructure they want to go with. Typically, we recommend 2 to 4 email service providers these days to dilute. So just like you're diluting across multiple domains, we also dilute across multiple registrars. So we have 3 registrars that we operate, and we have 4 email service providers. So there's multiple layers on how we dilute. So on one hand, we got MailForge, so on the shared IPs, InfraForge and dedicated IPs. It has an API. You can white label the whole thing with your custom domain as an agency and the resell. And then the typical stuff with Google and Microsoft as well. So we do all the 4 main approaches within the world of email, and it's all kind of from one provider.
Google, SMTP, Google, Microsoft. What's the fourth that I'm missing?
So MailForge is a totally different build to InfraForge. On the MailForge front, we got a totally different registrar, so it's a shared IP pool. On InfraForge, it's a totally different registrar and it has dedicated IPs. That's the difference. So it's what's called SMTP shared and SMTP private. There's 2 types of SMTPs typically that are being provisioned in the world. So that's the infrastructure part. Now, we have a software which is called WarmForge. So WarmForge essentially is a software which is just designed to improve deliverability. So it has warm-up, placement tests, it has API, etc. And we're big believers that whoever has warm-up built into the software, there's a bit of a risk with Google, Microsoft as we progress. So we used to have warm-up within Salesforce. We decoupled it, but it's still free if you have a Salesforce subscription. It's just that we're prepping for the future, and we're also seeing significantly better deliverability if the warm-up actually is in a separate place, in a separate app, essentially. So that's WarmForge, and then LeadsForge is the data product, essentially, that I already explained. It's a search engine for leads. It's kind of similar to concept to kind of Clay and a bunch of other softwares where it's like a wonderful enrichment, but in nowadays we don't tell you who are the data providers behind the scenes. It doesn't matter. Like, typically, you just need leads against your ICP, and that's what you go in and you find those leads. And then you can either push it out to Salesforce or any other software. So all softwares are decoupled. You can use APIs of the softwares, do a lot of interesting stuff. We also power other tech companies in the space that have similar offering to us. We do a lot of things.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. It's a lot to keep up with. Talking about building either some. Let's go down like your first SaaS, man. You guys had some incredible success within your first year, and talk to me about advice for first time SaaS founders and what they should be thinking about as they're scaling their first time around.
Sure. So kind of bit of a story there. So in the first year in particular, we scaled to about $1 million in ARR without hiring any employees. So there's literally 2 co-founders. One is on the back end, one is on the front end, and then me, sales guy. So I always say startups are pretty easy. Like you only need to do 2 things. One is to build some stuff, and then you sell that stuff, and you just need to do it very well, right? And then after $1 million, we started to hire some engineers and some people in support, but we still had 0 people in go-to-market. And then after $2 million, we started to hire folks in go-to-market. So I would say, it kind of sounds weird, but it's not like we used that sort of one channel or one approach to scale. We did a gazillions of things. And I think the reason why you need to do many things, or what I typically say, you need to do everything that you can, is because if people start seeing you across multiple places, so for example, say Reddit, say LinkedIn, say WhatsApp communities, say Slack communities, whatever, if they start seeing you in multiple places, then you get this sense that Frank is everywhere, Salesforce is everywhere, right? So then it also becomes much easier than actually to convert folks, right? If they see you on multiple different platforms. So it's kind of intentional that we do a lot of different things to try and acquire customers. But we just did it at a very smaller scale back in the days. Whether that's back in the days was writing, articles for SEO, doing YouTube videos, being visible on Reddit, on LinkedIn, and other places. But yeah, I also have a huge network of VP sales all across the world, predominantly in the US and Europe. So I was naturally able to tap into that network as well, naturally in the early days, because ultimately I'm building the software for my former self, the former self being VP sales with the big sales team, and looking at ways how you can generate generate pipeline with the least headcount. So it's quite easy to connect with other folks on that same topic. And I kind of know exactly what is it they're looking for, not just, from a standpoint of, hey, just pipeline. It's not just pipeline. There's also other metrics that go into the funnel. And what typically gets discussed at the board meeting, in the big SaaS company. You kind of need to know then how to build the software against that, because essentially software consolidation, efficiencies, driving pipeline are very frequently discussed topics in a lot of board meetings out there in a lot of software companies. So that's also part of the reasons why I'm building this sort of stack. Yeah, typically folks buy like 2 or 3 softwares from us, sort of on average. Naturally, the compound model has its, benefits, but that also means, with all the software that we have, it's quite a strain on the product team and engineering team actually to be shipping.
What do you say to people that try and tell you to like hyper focus on one product versus a multitude of products?
Yeah, but think of it this way: because of the all this AI stuff, all the LLM stuff, and everything that exists out there, right? So you look at Lovable, whatever it's essentially much easier to be building stuff these days than it used to be like a couple of years ago. So if that's the case, why don't you just aggressively build software? All you need to do is you need to know how to build it. So we have a very good grasp on how to build it. We're just missing more engineers. So even though our engineers and the output levels are stellar, we still need more engineers. We could literally double the engineering team right now if we would find essentially the right engineers with the right mindset, let's call it that way. And our engineers are a bit like salespeople that literally have monthly targets when it comes to shipping. There's literally a spreadsheet. In that spreadsheet, we outline exactly what needs to be shipped, how much they can handle, so everything's scoped out, right? So, and we justify why we're building this. Typically, it's either says bacon or tackling churn, like one of those two items or both. If somebody doesn't know what bacon stands for, it comes from bringing home the bacon. So you can chat GPT. But yeah, typically we optimize for more bacon, and that means everything that we ship has to result in more revenue. Maybe not now, but like it has to get us kind of further along the way. Some things like take time. So I'll give you an example. So we're looking to launch, say, LinkedIn. Within our software that we're going to hook up. You can use that, as an agency with unlimited profiles, or we're going to hook it up to Agent Frank as well for him to use LinkedIn. And that takes time to build it in the right way. So it can't be really done within a month. So we've been building that pretty much since January. So it's been taking some time, but it's something that we're looking to launch next month. So
do you think
but yeah, everything that we do is all about more bacon.
hedging your bets and placing small bets across the whole ecosystem, or is that kind of the mentality?
Good question. So yeah, we have I would call those bacon bets. So yes, we do look at making bets within the ecosystem of particular things. So for example, we know that we're not going to make a ton of money from warm up whatsoever. It's just not a thing. But we do know that we're going to make a ton of money from essentially sending emails, infrastructure, data. You definitely have these sort of pockets of revenue and inefficiencies in the space, and you can build also your software different to anybody else as well. So we definitely we don't just sort of let's call it replicate the software, but we look at build it with our own sort of twist on how we look at stuff. Because actually there's so many competitors, right? And if everybody does the same thing, then everything becomes very commoditized very fast, right? So this is also why we are doubling down on this whole concept of being an ecosystem, really. Right? So essentially, instead of you as a head of sales buying multiple point solutions and kind of stitching that together and having multiple invoices, multiple support teams, we're big believers that there's one team with a whole stack, because then we can see, let's say from a deliverability standpoint, if emails landing is spam, we can check the infrastructure, we can check the sending, we can check a lot of different things because we own all of that software.
Yep.
Yeah, it gives us a lot of control, a lot of visibility what happens behind the scenes.
Have you scrapped any products that you've built?
No. And the reason I think why we were, let's call it lucky on that front, again, because I spent over a decade in sales, like we're trying not to, fuck it up on that sort of front, right? So build something that will ultimately get deprecated, eventually. So no, so none of the products yet have been deprecated because they all are what I would call must-have. Like you need infrastructure, you need warm-up, you need to send emails, you need to have agents to reduce headcount, you need data. So all of those are must-have. So we look at it from a lens of like must-have. What is a literally must-have to build pipeline? So LinkedIn is a must-have, calling is a must-have. So we're going to build calling as a capability as an example, right? So that's how we typically look at it. And naturally, we validate the assumptions with the customers because, we speak to thousands of customers every single day, chat support, whatever. And yeah, we also have gazillions naturally of customers in our Slack as well. So like you can easily validate naturally. And I think the benefit working in this space is that, like you said, even though there's a lot of parties, even competitors, like we speak to competitors all the time, it's quite easy to validate with your ICP, with competitors, whatever, anybody in the space, or even WhatsApp community, etc., what is it that you're building? Would it make sense that this is really what you want to do or not? Like, because a lot of, if like 9 out of 10 people say no, this doesn't make any sense, then you start questioning, whether you should continue building this or not, right?
Totally. How do you take feedback? Like, how do you drink from a fire hose, not a trickle, when it comes to feedback from clients to help you guide where you're headed?
Yeah, so we can export all the data from the chat support and let's say Slack, and hundreds of Slack channels that we have, and you can extract data also from the web, from LinkedIn and G2 reviews, whatever, and then you can make up your mind that way, pass it through LLMs, and then say, okay, if I want to do this, what does the market think, or what do our customers think, etc. But yeah, we have a good pulse when it comes to feedback. So we essentially right now what we do is we combine the feedback that we get from customers together with my domain expertise in the space. Domain expertise from my end has higher weight because essentially what we're doing is we're trying to build that the customers have not seen yet. So it's a bit tricky, right? Because they're not necessarily asking for that because they don't know that's even possible, right?
Right.
So that's where the dilemma lies when it comes to sort of getting feedback from your users. But you definitely optimize what you're building with user feedback, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say once we get to a stage where let's take LeadsForge as an example. So LeadsForge is something that we have soft launched a couple months ago when it was just about cooked and you can actually use it and look at it. We did like 100 demos in a week, and we just literally did a reverse demo of the product. We're trying to figure out, and the product was very raw, definitely not up, very raw. So,
Yeah.
and instead of us saying, okay, let's do X, Y, Z, we showed it to like 100 people, did the reverse demo, and naturally recorded every single meeting, and then that had a bunch of notes, and we're looking at patterns like what are the critical items that have to be ironed out before we go for a full launch, which is happening next week. So what is it that needs to happen really for this to become what I would call a minimum lovable product? Like people would just log in. Yes, it doesn't have maybe rich feature set, but from the get-go, they will love it, they will use it, and we can easily generate hundreds of customers like we always do with every forge. So what needs to happen? So this is why, when we feel kind of good about, essentially, if you're not ashamed about your software when you just first time you release it, you're probably too late when it comes to the release. So definitely release it, be ashamed of it, show it to a lot of people, warn them at the beginning of the call that it's not a baked product, but you really appreciate the feedback and like you use the software, can still get all the credits, within that. So yeah.
Nice. Awesome. So we've got another whole conversation to have here around the agentic future. Any parting words of wisdom for anyone that's just getting into the space and just starting to use these tools?
Good question. So I think it doesn't matter about your agency, in sales, whatever. Like whenever you have a problem, doesn't matter with pipeline, etc. Always think about solving that problem with an AI agent off the shelf. If you're unable to see a good enough AI agent off the shelf, then use something like N810, build a bunch of workflows. And then if that's not possible, use an agency because time is money. So plugging an agency is the wisest choice when it comes to kind of risk and solving that problem. And then the last resort is actually hiring humans. So that's how we think about generally the whole space. Doesn't matter you're starting off or not. Be agent first and essentially human second is my probably top advice this year.
Going to be changing quite a bit the next year. Cool, man. Thank you. Appreciate you coming on as always. Great chatting.